So give us, for those who don't know you well, give us a little bit of information about your background. I just found a spider. Oh, okay. Sorry. There was the spider in my bed. Okay. I'm like, I literally just changed these sheets. And I was, okay, all right. I'm good. I'm okay. I'm fine.
You need to move, Jillian? Do we need to
I squished him. I didn't know what it was, and I picked it up, and it was a spider, and it.
Oh.
Yeah, it was not okay. It's fine. I'm good. It's fine. Okay. So restart.
Okay. We can instead talk about phobias if you.
Yeah, let's dissect that a little bit. I think I handled that well, to be honest. I think I handled that really well. So give us your background and kind of just your basic philosophy, maybe even some of like the fears and concerns you've been hearing, and how we can kind of address those types of things.
Okay. So my background is as an educational psychologist. I've been doing this for, I don't know, 20 something years. And I'm a licensed clinical counselor as well. So I primarily have worked with kids, you know, pre-kindergarten through high school. I am currently in Anne Arundel County as a school psychologist part-time, and then I do some private practice stuff from the counseling. So I kind of get the best of both worlds, because school psychology is a little bit more, you know, educationally related, and then the counseling is a little bit more therapeutic. So I get to kind of dip my toe in and fulfill my passions in both areas. I've been with Anne Arundel now this is going on my second 2.5 years, something like that. And I'm from California originally, moved out here in 2018. So I'm still kind of new to Maryland, but I love it so much. Other than that, I have 4 kids of my own. I have 4 girls. I have a preschool through high school. So I literally am kind of in the thick of it with pretty much any age at this point. And I am feeling it just as much as everybody else right now. So what I've heard and what I've the conversations that I've had just on a personal level as well as a professional level from everybody is really just this overwhelming anxiety of like unknown and uncertainty. And I feel the same way. It's funny because like you think like, oh, if you work in the district, you probably are privy to some information, and that's just not true. We don't get a lot of the information. We get the information when everybody else gets the information a lot of the times. So it makes it just as hard because you just have this level of uncertainty of like, what's coming next and how are we going to deal with this? And is it the right move? And is it I feel like every move that you think you're going to make, you question, right? Is this going to be good for my kids or not good for my kids? And I hear that a lot from parents too. I feel the same way. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I have found that the primary thing that's kind of helped me manage this so far is just focusing on their mental health and social emotional well-being. I think that it's really easy to get kind of caught up in the academic stuff. And I know, Jillian, we were just talking about how like academic stuff, I'm not worried about it. You know, it's honestly at some point, especially during the spring, that was the last thing on my list during the spring. You know, now that we're moving into fall, you know, I'd like to see that beefed up a little bit more. And I'd like to see a little bit more like, you know, not necessarily the schedule that is proposed. I don't know how that's going to work, but some more academics that's a little bit more consistent. And I feel like the teachers that I know have been working their butts off to try to create something that is meaningful and engaging. But you know, this is virtual. Nobody knows what we're doing. We're all winging it at this point. So it's going to be a trial and error, I think. So anyway, I just talked on and on and on. So I don't know.
No, that's great. That's great. I really like what you said, that all of us are kind of winging it. This is completely new for our educators and completely new for us as parents and mental health professionals. So nobody knows what's going to happen.
Right.
I do like, again, that you had mentioned that we don't have to be overly concerned with academics this year. This is probably not going to be a stellar academic year for the majority of our kids. And I know it might sound a little crazy, like we said earlier, to say, I don't care about their academics right now. But as you mentioned, right now, their mental health is extremely important. And I know we touched base on that a little bit with the article that you were just quoted in for Chesapeake Family. and you had said that we need to focus on their mental health and their social and emotional health. Can you tell us why it's so important for kids to be in that healthy headspace before we approach like education?
Well, I mean, it really boils down to kind of the foundational aspects of life and learning, right? We talk about like Maslow's hierarchy, and if we don't have your basic needs met, I mean, all the way down, we can talk all the way down to like, you know, food and shelter and that type of thing. But then you move up that hierarchy and you have to be able to feel safe. You have to be able to feel protected. You have to be able to feel loved. And if you have all of those things in place, then you can actually be open to new ideas and new information coming in, because you're no longer focused on just survival.
Right.
Because really, that's really what it boils down to when you're looking at that hierarchy is, you know, the basic survival and then emotional survival. And then you move up to more of a, like a self-actualization and being able to reflect and that type of thing. And learning kind of falls towards that top part. So if we are not focused on addressing those basic needs, which a big part of that is social, emotional, and mental health, then our kids are not going to be available for learning. And I think that, you know, there's a big debate right now going on about kids going back and kids not going back. And you know, my feeling is no matter where we are with our kids, we have to be addressing the social emotional piece. It doesn't matter if they're back in school or they're at home, we have to somehow be reaching them. I think it's harder to do virtually, right? I was just having this conversation with you, Jillian, about like trying to do even virtual telehealth and telecounseling and things like that is so much harder than it is in person, but it is possible. It's just that we're all figuring it out of how to connect with those kids, how to reach the kids and the teachers and the parents, by the way. You know, that's a whole nother issue of like, how do we do this wrap around with them somehow to support everybody? I think group is really helpful with that, because it helps, you know, it's a space for all of us as moms to be able to actually have these conversations and feel supported. but from a kid's perspective, it's just, in my opinion, paramount. That needs to be our number one priority. And then we can throw in that academics, you know, secondary, but anyway.
Yeah.
That's your question.
No, perfect. I will say I've introduced my kids to the concept of online learning throughout the summer with things like OutSchool, and they've actually really enjoyed it. And they've even utilized the whole like contact this person's parents after the class is over because they connected with a kid.
Yeah.
My concern here is that I'm allowing them to choose the classes that pique their interest.
Right.
So they're engaged because they're taking an interest in the class for a specific reason. How that's going to translate into a regular school day where maybe they're not super interested in a math class. I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but I'm hoping that, you know, hopefully it'll be a little less foreign of a concept to them. Let's talk a little bit about how, I think you and I have discussed this before, that children are going to learn no matter what. I kind of joke that my kids learn things I don't want them to learn, even if I try hard not to let them learn that. So I feel like kids are going to learn no matter what. So I'm not overly concerned about them getting left behind. And I think you've mentioned that before as well. But can we talk a little bit about how we address those social emotional needs with things like the online learning?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that you can do is to make sure that you have, as adults, we kind of need to have ourselves in check and regulated. I think one of the hardest parts that I can just speak for myself is when I had 2 or 3 kids on the computers, and this was again in spring, so it was a little different. I think it'll be different in the fall. But I had 2 or 3 kids online and they were doing their work, and like one was asking a question and another one needed help. And like myself, I could feel my own blood pressure go up and my own like, I had enough trouble myself regulating, so I can only imagine what it was like for them. So I think finding ways to either take breaks for yourself or do things for yourself. And I was just mentioning that this is my goal right now, is like self-care and making room for self-care for myself, and not just like going and taking a hot bath, but literally things like this, like getting online with moms or doing book clubs, right? Like those are all of my things that I'm working on. If you are able to kind of have your own regulation mastered, then you're able to help them, because what we're doing with our kids is co-regulating. We're co-regulating with them right now because they can't do it on their own a lot of the times. When they become really escalated, their go-to is going to be behavior. Their go-to is going to be checking out. Their go-to is going to be something totally different than what we might do. So we have to actually co-regulate with them and kind of walk them through some of this process of like calming down and using strategies and things like that. So that's number one. I also think I'm a really, really big proponent of like calming spaces and calming corners. And, you know, I really always advocate for that in my schools and my classes as well. I think that's just like magical for some kids to be able to have a space where they can go to feel like they can just kind of de-escalate. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be a beanbag chair or a comfy pillow, like set of pillows in a corner, something that they can squish on, you know, I mean, it could be a dark space, like a fort that they make that they can hide in, whatever it is, but just having that space so that if they feel like they need to take a break, they can go do that. Right. And then basically helping them understand when that's appropriate to use. Other things like having an organized space for them is super great for helping to manage some of that social emotional, because if they have their own organized space, then I don't know how you guys feel, but I know for me, before I can do anything productive, I kind of have to have my space in order. And then I'm allowed to kind of like, my own mind feels like it has things compartmentalized a little bit so that I can move forward doing something. And kids many times are like that. They just don't know it. So again, it doesn't have to be a big deal, right? It could be something as simple as just having a clean space with the computer. This is going to be huge this year, like any kind of headphones where they can actually block out the noise and be able to focus. Because if we can, anything we can do to help them adapt to this environment is going to be crucial in helping them regulate. And we really regulation is the big thing. There's also going to be other kids online that are not regulated, right? I know, especially during spring, there were kids that were up and around and running around and yelling and doing other things, and it made it hard for some kids to focus. So I'm hoping there's a plan in place for that, and maybe like pull out in small groups with certain kids or being able to address that. But in the meantime, the more we can help our kids kind of adapt with some other accessories might be helpful too. I'm sure I'm missing other stuff, but those are the big ones for me. Yeah, Helena.
I guess I have a question, you know, for me personally, like the challenge number one, the day comes September 8th, and I have to tell my kids, go in that even organized space, go in their rooms and sit down in front of a computer. And it just to me feels like it's child alone with computer.
Yeah.
There's not gonna be another humans there. I mean, they're in a screen. And not from, of course there's engagement, but there's also,
it's different though. It's very different. Yeah.
It's like, it's my I have two kids, right? And they're gonna be in the room, hopefully alone. They're gonna be screaming for us, okay, but their model is they're gonna be in their space alone, just like we in a cubicle office. And
well, I think again, it kind of goes back to this uncertainty, right? Because like, I can imagine, you know, I'm developing some lessons to work with my little counseling groups. And when I'm developing these lessons, I'm developing them to be as like energetic and like experiential as possible. My hope is that a lot of the teachers will also be doing that. I don't know how it's going to roll out, honestly. But, you know, things like engaging the kids in conversation and like puppet shows and fun things that are very kind of kinesthetic in nature, where they're engaged with the people online. You're 100% right. You cannot get away from the fact that it is like I am right now. We're isolated in front of a computer, and it's just you and the rest of the people on the computer. That being said, there are ways to still engage the kids. We just have to be really kind of thinking outside the box to do that. And I'm also hoping that during these they've mentioned these movement breaks that are going to be coming in, and we're going to be having these times where they're going to be able to actually get up and move. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know yet, but I'm hoping that at that point there'll be some other types of interaction that's different than just sitting here and listening and talking, I guess is what I'm saying. But you're right. It's that in itself is not ideal, for sure.
Right.
And I don't know any other way around it other than, you know, having, you know, small groups of kids, which most people aren't able to do at this point. So,
well, I mean, there is some offerings keep popping up and people trying to form in pods, but I don't want to be in a consistent basis having kids from different classes or different schools and different levels. And I don't want to send my kids to the place where it's same thing. I mean, I can imagine when people trying to take this responsibility, but being really able to manage it, especially if the kids different levels. But
Right.
I'm totally okay if like you and my daughter end up in one class this year, if they have a day, like a school play date, when they just do the same thing in the same room.
Right.
And they have the same teacher, and that's it. And I don't think like I would go with like whole group.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of a comfort on like Wednesday or something else, if we'll connect with the classmates. That's I would probably would be looking in October or something for things like that.
Yeah, I do think it also depends. It's kind of like Jillian said about the choice piece of it. I think that's a huge component that, you know, that's just not really possible when it comes to traditional school, right? I mean, we have our subjects that are taught and we have like the core curriculum that has to be followed. And so the best that teachers can do is try to find a way to make that material as engaging as possible. And most of the teachers that I work with personally do a really good job at most of the time. But it's totally different than like my daughter loves hamsters, and she found a class in out school about hamsters, right? And so she got to learn all about hamsters, and we don't do that in a traditional school setting. So she was totally engaged because it was her preference and it was her topic of interest. And you know, that's just not how a traditional school program works.
Well, it's also time-wise. When my kids also did couple classes like that, and yeah, it's fun, but it's like 1 hour a week, 2 hour a week, and we're talking about what 4, and I have this thing in front of me, just 4 hours at least.
I know. And I
don't work like I don't work like that.
I know I have some anxiety about that. I don't know how it's going to roll for my kids because, you know, and even when I showed the schedule to my 2 older girls last night, they were like, "Whoa, like I don't know if I can do that," you know, because it sounds like a long time. And I know people say, "Well, oh, it's the same thing as being in class." You know, you're in class for that long, but it's different. It's like kind of like you were saying, Jillian, there's an energy with people around you that you don't have when you're in front of a computer screen. So right. I don't know. I mean, I'm really trying to be optimistic and hopeful about kind of like that our teachers are going to find creative ways to make this engaging. And so, you know, we're gonna try. We'll see what happens.
I will say what I found to appease any sort of anxiety that comes up with our kids is when they start asking questions that I don't have the answers to, like my oldest, like I said, she's going to be trying online learning. And what I just tell her is I'm not quite sure how it's going to look yet, but we're going to navigate it together. And if we need to make changes, we'll make changes. And that way they don't feel like they're stuck if something doesn't work. They know that, okay, well, mom's not 100% sure either. But like you said, I'm emotionally regulating myself. I'm not freaking out about it. I'm just saying, I don't know yet. We'll see. We'll see what it looks like. And if it doesn't work, we can address changes. And that seems to have helped appease any sort of anxiety that my kids were feeling about it.
Yeah, we had the same conversation and it did help. It did help. They're still feeling a little nervous, but that's because they're just starting. Like I've got a 6th grader and a 9th grader. So they're like starting new schools. So that in itself is a little, yeah. Were you going to say something, Lauren?
Yeah, I was just going to say one of my ideas that worked, my kid he's going to start kindergarten this year, so I haven't done it with students, but so if you don't, other people don't know, I'm a school counselor. So I had my students do a self-care jar where they would just like have a jar or even just a list or something of things that help them be calm or like almost kind of like a reward. And if it's kind of like you can use it for regular, but I'm thinking about utilizing it kind of as like an if-then chart and saying like, when you get this assignment finished, let's pick something out of the jar. And then, because that's how I operate as an adult, like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write 2 more paragraphs and then I'm going to go get a snack or like, I just chunk my day that way. And that's how I motivate myself. Or like, I finish the day and I can have a glass of wine or, but I just think that might be a good motivation for the kids to, it'll chunk it up and then it'll also kind of give them a bit of a paycheck that we all need.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that
reward
idea.
system.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kimberly, I did want to ask about, I'm sure in a perfect world, I would like to say our kids are not going to have meltdowns about this, and there's not going to be any negative emotions, but there will be, I'm sure. Elena, your son keeps trying to call me to talk to my daughter. I keep ignoring him, and I'm not trying to be rude to him. Sorry. So it's like the fourth time. What I was going to ask you about that is when they have these meltdowns, I know in the moment as a parent, it can be exceptionally difficult to not kind of meet them with the same sort of negativity or anger or frustration. But do you have any advice for how we can guide them through? You mentioned the calming spaces, which is great. But as a parent, how do we first put ourselves in that perspective of, I'm trying to meet them where they're at. I can tell they're frustrated, so let me meet them with a little bit of compassion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think first of all, helping our kids come up with a vocabulary for those feelings is super important, because if they have a vocabulary to pull on, then you're able to have those discussions with them when they're having a meltdown, or they're in the middle of like escalation towards a meltdown, right? So you can kind of catch it in that moment. So teaching them what the words are, what the feelings feel like in their bodies are, it's like a gift that we can give our kids in terms of helping them regulate. So if you've done that already, and if they have access either to some kind of like visual, or they've already mastered their feelings and what it feels like in their body, then that's a really, really great transition when they start to have a meltdown, to be able to start pointing those things out. So like I have a 4-year-old, and so she knows when she starts having a really kind of escalation time, I'll actually point out to her like what's going on in your body. I'll say, wow, you look like you're really frustrated or angry right now, because your face is turning red and you're yelling at me, and your arms are really tight. Is that true? And she'll say, yes, I'm really mad, and she'll like yell. But she labeled it, right? So when she labeled it, and then that's when we turn to like, okay, well, what are some of the things we can do? Like, I'm going to give you a minute. What can you do? Or sometimes I'll say like, do you need a hug? Because sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes they don't need a minute. Sometimes they need compassion, and they need like a physical squeeze, And so by teaching them that there are options, and then letting them tell you what they need, that's like, really a gift that we're giving our kids, because you're teaching them not only to identify and regulate, but you're teaching them how to advocate for themselves, to say what they need. So it's hard, because I know I have my own triggers. So like when my kids are yelling or disrespectful, that's my trigger. So I have to put myself in check. But it's so worth it when, like, I've seen a few times when when I have really put it in check and monitored myself and like responded in a way that I know would be helpful, and she has just turned it on and used these skills, and I'm like, oh my God, it worked. So I do think that feelings vocabulary, giving them choices, helping them label, and basically that's co-regulating with them, right? Being able to walk them through it is just the perfect kind of trifecta in helping them de-escalate when they're overwhelmed.
Great. On that topic, I just briefly want to point out, if anybody liked this idea, please talk to Kimberly afterwards. She has some exceptional resources that she's put together and was gracious enough to offer me them to kind of try with my kids, and they've been really wonderful. I don't have all of them right here, but I do have, this is the feelings chart she's created. And my kids actually like to do this every single day. And sometimes they'll pick something they're not just because they feel like talking about it, which fine, that's great.
I know.
Also the rainbow self-talk, which we do every night. I have them pick kind of this like little mantra or self-affirmation. And then these cards, which I thought were great, which are the calming strategy cards. So that definitely touches on some of those ideas that you had there.
Yeah, my kids use those all the time. We have them in our little playroom that we have, and they use them all the time. Not my older two. My older two are kind of over it, but my younger two are like super still into it. So it's great for setting a foundation. Like and it doesn't have to be that. It could be anything. Like it could be the zones of regulation. It could be just like having pictures of faces up and like helping them see what the face looks like when you're mad or whatever. I mean, it could be anything just to build that vocabulary.
Perfect. Robin, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for taking my question or comment. But my son has ADHD, and I'm a special ed teacher. And so you can only imagine how stressed out I'm already stressed. I saw the schedule yesterday and I just said, I just want to just quit my job. But anyway, crazy. But both of my children have learning differences. And one of the things that I do as a special ed teacher is that I'm constantly working on regulation with my oldest, regulation with my youngest. And one of the things that we found that was really beneficial, besides what you were saying in terms of recognizing their feelings, teaching them to advocate for themselves, and listening to when they do need a break and they need some support. But one of the things that I found was really helpful for my son, especially, is doing his affirmations every morning. And then throughout his day, letting him know when I found him doing an affirmation, just saying, hey, buddy, look, you're being resilient. I talked about it this morning, and look at you doing that right now. Because it's kind of like that motivator to get through something difficult. So when we created his learning environment, one of the things that we did for him was on the whiteboard, we had an accomplishment portion on there.
Right.
Besides the schedule, besides the to-do list, we wanted to highlight his accomplishments. And during the school year, we had a jar that we would put them in. So whenever he had a really rough day, we would go through and say, look at all the great things you've done so far. So you're capable. But this year we're putting it on the board because it's right in front of where he's going to be working. So his teachers can see it, his peers can see it. But it's also just a high five, quick way of just saying, great job being resilient, great job bouncing back. And also my last comment was, one of the things that we recently purchased was a hammock, like an indoor hammock for him, for his like, at his cool down moment. And a lot of moms with ADHD were all recommending hammock, this great piece of it. So when we create, corner, put that in there. Now we can't get them out of it. I don't know what we're going to do when school starts. I don't know how we're going to get them out of the hammock, but
let him have
it's
a
one of those
in the hammock. I love those. Are so awesome. Those are awesome ideas. I'm going to steal the affirmations on the board for sure. I love that idea, and I hadn't thought about that, and it's fabulous. But yeah, I think because I have an 11-year-old with ADHD, and it's something I think about, like the movement, the swinging, or there's something about it that just works for them and their brains. I think it's really interesting. But yeah, I love it.
I think, yeah, and actually I think we had touched on that in the article as well. I think you had mentioned that it's really important to celebrate those small successes and the small accomplishments throughout the day, because there are going to be some bigger frustrations. So we can celebrate those successes. That's great. Lauren, as a school counselor, can you just, sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
No, it's okay. I just unmuted myself because I wanted to ask Robin if she could share what the affirmations were. Like, you don't have to do it now, but like if you want to share on the page or something, because I thought that was a great idea too.
That would be great. That would be a great resource to have. And Lauren, if you get a chance, if you would maybe enlighten us a little bit about the fact that school counselors are still going to be available to help support their students, even though you're not in the school environment with them.
Yeah. So we're definitely like, we're here, and we, in a lot of cases, I don't know how it's going to go in the fall, but in the spring, we were not permitted to do like whole class lessons or groups. Oh, that's great. I see.
Love that.
So cool. We weren't allowed to do groups, and it was just kind of, I think that our department, my son's crawling on my lap now, was worried about confidentiality and the ethics of it all. I don't know if it's going to change in the fall and we'll be able to kind of do more groups and lessons, but we are definitely available for individual sessions with kids, like virtually. And honestly, more than meeting with kids, I met with parents in the spring. I just gave them resources and like listened to them, honestly. And that's not usually a big part of my job, but it was what needed to happen in the springtime. So I definitely think and Kim and I work together. So I think pushing out those like strategies to the families, like hopefully if you know who your school counselor is at your school, feel free to reach out to them and just be like, here's like, you know, this is my kid. I want you to make sure like this, what, you know, who she is or who he is. Just like establish that communication, because it makes it feel so much better when you know that there's somebody else out there that you can call if you need to, but you may not have to.
Okay, great. But it's great to know that the parents and the kids do have the support staff as needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. So more like to professional on this. What are kind of my warning signals? Just things to look after when I can say, oops, my child is really in a problem and struggle a lot. And I'm not, yes, like occasional meltdown is fine, understandable. But if I see like continuously, they just sad, or any other triggers that probably should tell me, hey, just reach out for help, and it's time.
Well, I would say, and Lauren, feel free to jump in too, but I would say if their behavior really changes, that's a big sign. Like changes dramatically from who they normally are, that's a very big sign. If they start checking out and get withdrawn and they're not interested in things that they normally are interested in, I would reach out. If you're seeing that you have really like explosive behaviors that are happening consistently, reach out. I mean, anything that is kind of like atypical for your child that's kind of gone on for a consistent amount of time, I would say don't even hesitate. Just reach out to the school counselor or the school psychologist and ask for just some guidance or support or help, because it's not going to hurt anything to just at least like have those conversations, for sure.
Well, you know, there's kind of like mental, not a mental block, but like we all hear and we all hear, and sometimes it just goes in. I'm even reaching out to my kids' teachers sometimes, like, hey, I think 2-3 times. Well, she's a mom too, and she has kids right there, and I don't want to overwhelm. It was like, all right, maybe I can handle this and this myself. So that's
but remember that that's also, you know, like this is their area of specialty, right? This is what they do. And so I think don't be afraid to reach out, because this is, and even, I mean, I see so many moms using, you know, this group as a platform that's really helpful. And it kind of, I think, at least for me, sometimes puts me in check, like, okay, I'm not crazy, like someone else feels this too, you know?
Yeah, right.
So it's really helpful, I think, to have this platform where we can all support each other and share, and let really kind of like normalize some of this, because some of it is just a normal reaction for our kids and for ourselves to this crazy pandemic like that's going on. You know, it looks like, you know, depression, and it looks like anxiety, and it looks like all these other things, but really it's just a traumatic response to what's going on right now. And that's normal for this particular situation. It doesn't make it okay, and it definitely we still need to help and support each other, but it normalizes it a little bit in the scope of things to see that other people are also doing that as well. So I would just say, do not be afraid to reach out to the school counselor. I know school counselors are always open and willing and want to help. And I know at least those counselors that I work with and that I know are trying to get help to families. Like they're trying to reach families. They're trying to find ways to help get them engaged or see what they need. So do it for sure, I guess is my suggestion.
Yeah, I definitely would second what Kim says, because I think a lot of, depending on your background or what your school system was like growing up, you may not have had a school counselor. And in a lot of cases, parents think it's like sending a kid to like therapy or something, and it's not. The school counselor is there for every child in the school, and it's different. It can just be a person that they trust, that they can connect with. It doesn't have to be, it's different than, you know, sending them to a psychologist or something like that.
And even the school psychologist, I mean, I think we kind of get a little bit of a like there's a miscommunication sometimes, and people think what we do at school. It's not therapy, right? It's counseling, but it's educationally related counseling. So it's a little bit different because it's things like self-regulation, managing anxiety, things like that are not therapeutic. It's more like, how can I help you manage so that you can learn in the classroom? Basically, how can I meet you some of your needs, your Maslow's needs, in order to get back in and bloom in the classroom? That's really what it boils down to. So, you know, that's exactly why I have the two things that I do, because on the with my counseling thing, I get to do the therapeutic thing, because in the schools we don't really do the therapeutic piece. It's more educationally related. So I think I totally would agree with Lauren, where I hear sometimes people don't really want to send their kids to a counselor or the school psychologist at school because they don't want them to be in therapy, and it's totally not that. So
Great. Anybody else have any questions or things they're kind of looking for some guidance on? Or Kimberly or Lauren, any kind of last minute words of wisdom you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm grateful that we have this group, because I feel like I think all of us are in this very unknown, uncertain road. We're going down this road together. And I just think it's, I'm going to rely heavily on the moms in this group in particular to help, because I think that as my kids are going a little bit bonkers, whether they stay in, you know, Anne Arundel Public or they homeschool or whatever we decide to do down the road, it's going to be a challenge. So
Right.
I'm just happy to have this, really.
Aw. Yeah, this has been a great support for a bunch of us, myself included. I think it is really important for us all to remember that this is new for everyone. Nothing is permanent. Just because we make one decision doesn't mean we have to stick with it. If we need to make changes, we can make changes. And also, I think it's super important to mention that none of us have any reason to judge ourselves or our children on any of this. So let's just make sure that we're kind to ourselves on this, because we're all gonna kind of wade through the mud a bit. So
yeah. And lastly, too, on that particular point, I think having a lot of kind of grace and patience with our educators is really important too, because you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir with this group, but I would really like to see, you know, teachers are trying really hard. They really are. And I would love for them to be supported as well. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else? Are we all good? Are we feeling a little less nervous?
I don't know about
Nervous.
that.
It's just, it's kind of, I have the same feeling. Let's just start doing this. Let's just do it. Same, we're gonna fail, then we're gonna fail. I mean, but it's not like we, you know, once in our lifetime gonna fail. So
Right.
I think we're all really anxious to get started and see how it goes, because it's kind of like you said, Jillian, like, if we have to shift gears, that's fine. We'll shift gears and we'll move in another direction. I just don't want to, I just want to know, like, one way or the other, what we're doing.
Yes, it's the anticipation. Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this and sharing your insight. And if anybody has questions, you know, the group is there. We can definitely make connections where needed. So, with that, I think that we have wrapped it up. Thank you so much for all of the great insight. And I'm going to go hand my phone over to to Juliet, my daughter. She can talk to Elena's son. So
have a good night, you guys.
Awesome.
You too.
Love you all.
See you
Thank
later.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.